Welcome to the Totin Chip demonstration. The Totin Chip in BSA allows scouts to work with and use knives, axes, hand axes, and saws. All kinds of wood cutting tools. Your scout master needs to sign off on your Totin Chip, so it's up to him to determine whether or not you are worthy of the Totin Chip award. So watching this video may to your Scoutmaster be enough, but sometimes your Scoutmaster may require you to demonstrate use of it yourself. So make sure you talk to your Scoutmaster about getting your Totin Chip. But today I will be showing you everything safety wise and use of tools that you'll need to know. So today with our cutting, the first thing you're going to need to do is have a safe cutting area. So obviously, since we're going to be using sharp tools like saws and axes, we're going to need to make it known to everybody that we're going to be using them. So we mark off a nice area with a nice bright rope like this, or something like police tape, something so that everybody sees it very visibly and knows not to enter. Now, if nobody's in, you can enter just fine. But now if my cameraman here, Tanner, wants to enter, he can't do so. So if he wants to enter, he has to ask me permission, since I was the first person to stand in here.
Permission to enter?
Permission granted. So once I have given him permission, he's allowed to enter. Now when you're in an axe yard, you want to try and only have 2 people at once. You don't want to have 3 or 4, 5 people, because that's going to be too distracting, too many people, and the risk of injuries is too great. Now the first thing to do when you're using an axe yard or any sort of tools in this axe yard is make sure that you have the proper safety equipment. Safety goggles keeps our eyes protected from any wood chips that might fly into us. We're going to want to wear some solid boots like I have here. We don't want to accidentally cut our toes. And we're going to need to use work gloves so that we can keep our hands free from blisters or free from cuts. So the first thing we're going to discuss is using a knife. In the BSA, you're supposed to use a knife that can fold like this. Sheath knives are not allowed. When you are storing and carrying a knife, you always hold your knife closed. The blade should only be out when you are going to use it. Now I have my gloves and goggles, but with a knife you don't necessarily need all that. I do recommend using a thumb guard so that your thumb stays protected when you're using your knife. If you do want to use your gloves and your goggles, go ahead. Safety is always recommended. Now when we sharpen our knife, we can take our blade out and we will use something like a sharpening stone, or if you don't have one of these, you can just use sandpaper. I have right here what is called a slip stick, which we use to clean our knife after we sharpen it. But on the other side of my slip stick, I have a sandpaper. So you can use that if you don't quite have a stone like this. Now remember, if you have an oil stone, to oil it prior to using it, or a wet stone, wet it prior. This is a dry stone, so I don't need to do any of that. I can jump right into carving. So when I'm sharpening my knife, I'm going to hold the blade with almost no angle. I'm going to slide it along as if I'm trying to carve into the stone. So I slide from tip to handle, keep on doing that. Make sure you're keeping count. I just did that 5 times, because then we're going to do it on the opposite end so that both sides of our knife stay sharp. So I just did 5 strokes. I'm going to do another 5 strokes on this side. 3, 4, 5. Now when we're passing a knife, you're going to always have your knife closed. And my friend here is going to help me demonstrate. So when I pass a knife, I hand it to him, but I don't let go until he says thank you.
Thank you.
So the purpose of him saying thank you is so that I know that he has a good grip on the knife. Now after he says thank you, I will respond with you're welcome, so that he knows that I'm about to release the knife. Thank you. You're welcome. Before you ever are going to cut something with your knife or any other tool, we're going to do what's called a safety circle. So with our knife, we are going to hold it shut, and in our arm extended, we are going to hold it outwards and draw a circle to make sure that there are no people or objects that may be in the way of our cutting. Now when we're cutting with our knife, we always want to be working at a safe space. So I'm going to be using this log here as a table. I'll be cutting it later, but for now it's a table. So make sure you're working at a safe and sturdy table. And when you cut, you're going to want to hold what you're cutting steady, and just like we did when sharpening it, we slide across very lightly from tip to handle of our blade. We don't want to push very hard. We're just going to lightly cut across, like so. So the hand axe is like a smaller version of the axe, but all of our safety is very similar. So with our hand axe, we are going to keep it in a sheath at all times. So here we have these wooden sheaths that the blade sits in, and it holds nice and sturdy onto it. At your troop, you may have a tape or a leather sheath. These are a little fancy, but they serve the same purpose. Whenever you're not using an axe or a hand axe, you always want to keep this on so that the blade is safe from harming others. Now, when we unsheath it to use it, we got to remember that at all times this is in our hands. So when we are carrying it, we hold it in a very uncomfortable way, where we keep our fingers across the bar here, and then we hold the top with our thumb, our index finger on the back of the blade, and then use our pinky for support. I personally like this method because it always reminds me that I have a sharp tool in my hand. Now when I carry it, I'm going to carry it down by my side and with the blade outwards and away from my body. So that way if I am to fall, I can extend my arm out this way and let go of it, and then it won't put me at any risk. Now whenever I'm going to hand off the hand axe, maybe my friend would like to take a turn and I'm getting exhausted, I'm going to maintain my way of holding it in our uncomfortable way so that we remember we have it. And now I'm going to pass it to him and hand him the handle. Now make sure your blade is away from both of you. You don't want it up or down, because then if one of us are to drop it, we're at risk of getting hurt. So we keep it away from us. Now when I'm handing it to him, I don't let go until he says thank you.
Thank you.
And just like the knife, I'll make sure that I know that he has a good grip on it by waiting for that thank you, and then I'll tell him that I am ready to release it by saying you're welcome. And once again, thank you.
You're welcome.
When we are sharpening an axe or a hand axe, we will do the same way for both, since they both have a very similar blade. We start from one end and we slide down and across with little to no angle, just like we did with the knife. We got to make sure we get our whole blade sharpened and both sides. So I just did 3 there, so now I'm going to flip it over and do another 3. Make sure you're going slowly when you're cutting towards you, and make sure you're cutting into the glove so that you don't hurt your arm. So when you're chopping with a hand axe, we don't want to do it the same way as with an axe because of how much smaller it is. So with an axe, if we are to miss, will hit our chopping block, or worst case scenario, the ground. Now with the hand axe, we're not going to hit either of those. If we come down and we miss, it's going to hit us in the legs. And obviously, we don't want that to happen. So what we do with a hand axe is we kneel down so that we change our center of gravity, and if we are to miss, we're going to hit into the ground and not into our leg. So a hand axe is going to typically be used less for chopping big logs like you would with an axe, and more for cutting up wood like this here into smaller pieces. So the first thing we're going to do is make our safety circle, just like we did with our axe. So once again, we go slowly with the handle out, blade behind us, flip, slowly go around, and then we're going to go up and down, since we're going to be swinging up and down. Now when we cut, we're going to cut slowly and surely in a V pattern. So you simply go back and forth into one spot, chipping off pieces of wood in a V pattern. This is a bow saw, the only type of saw that is allowed in the BSA. So basically you'll know it's a bow saw because the blade is held on from both ends. You may see a table saw that just has a handle and then your big metal blade piece that kind of just hangs out. This one holds it very steady and from both. When you're carrying a bow saw such as this one, you always hold it down and at your side, so this way again, if you fall, it won't cut into you or into somebody that's behind you or in front of you. It's going to go out to your side and avoid any harm. So as you can see here, the blades are very rigid, so we can't use a sharpening stone. We can use a file to go through each of the ridges, but that's going to take a very long time. These blades are cheap enough that I'd recommend just buying a new blade. You can take it off from the bow saw pretty easily and simply replace the blade. You can go to a hardware store like Home Depot and purchase them in bulk. They're pretty cheap and easy to replace. So if I'm going to pass the saw to my friend, I'm going to make sure the blades are downwards. We don't want to keep it at the side because the blade is much longer and it's going to be difficult for him to grab it. So what he's going to do is he's going to place both hands on the blade and he's going to inform me that he has them by saying thank you.
Thank you.
Just like the previous two, I'm going to tell him that I'm ready to release it by saying you're welcome. And again, thank you.
You're welcome.
So when we are using a saw, we'll be using it for a similar purpose to the hand axe, where we're cutting a larger log into shorter pieces. So we're always going to want to be on our knee with a foot flat on the ground, our opposite hand down, making sure that our log is safe and secure. We use a chopping block here to keep our log elevated so that when we're done cutting, we don't cut into the ground that will ruin our saw blade. Before we go on to cut, we're going to do a safety circle. So just like you would with any other tool, you're going to make sure the blades are out behind you, and you slowly draw a circle with the blades in the opposite direction that you're going so that you don't hurt anyone near you. Since we're going to be sawing it, we're not going to be really swinging it, so we don't need to be drawing a safety circle upwards. When we start to saw, we draw back the full length of our blade here a few times to get it started, and then we go back and forth with the full blade. You don't want to do just the center of the blade. because then you're going to have really sharp ends and really dull center, and your blade is going to get ruined much faster. So you keep sawing back and forth until you've gone all the way into your wood. So before we are going to cut something with our axe, we're going to make sure we have what is called a chopping block. So here I have my stump that I've been using as a table. Sadly, we're going to be cutting it now. But beneath that, as you'll see, there is a second stump. This ensures that our blade does not cut into the ground. That would damage our blade. It's going to cut through this wood and into the second wood. Now before we cut, we're going to make what's called a safety circle, just like the knife. Although with this, we can't quite close our axe, so what we do is we hold it by the head and we extend our arm outward with the handle out, and we slowly move out, making sure our blade is behind us so that we're not cutting anything. We flip it and then we slowly go back. Now another issue we might have with our axe is things above us, since we're going to be swinging up. So we're also going to make our safety circle by going upwards. Make sure your blade is always going behind you so that you're not cutting anything. Spin it and then bring it back down. Now when we're cutting with our axe, we need to be very careful. This is the most dangerous of the tools we'll be working here. So after we've made our safety circle, we're going to do a practice swing to make sure that we are at a safe distance. So to do this, I'm going to raise it over my head as if I'm going to cut, and then I'm going to slide it down slowly and make sure I'm cutting. Now right here, I was close to the edge, so I'm a little afraid that if I go too fast, I'm going to miss it altogether. And if I do that, that would end horribly. So what I'm going to do is now adjust myself. I'm going to walk a little bit closer to it, and I'm going to make another practice cut. This time I'm too far. You may need to adjust yourself a couple times. Just keep doing practice cuts until you're very center, like this one here. Now, I've found that I move a lot when I'm cutting. So I do a practice cut in between most swings. You don't have to do this, but I just feel it's a good safety habit. Now when we're actually going to cut, we raise it over our head like we did, and we're going to slide our hand down as we bring it forward. Now we're not going to use any muscle. We're simply using the weight of the head of the axe and gravity to do all the work for us. So we swing, go forward and into our wood. Then we lodge it out by pulling it backwards. I'll make another check and then cut. Now it only takes a couple cuts and we should be able to break our log apart with our hands, like so. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to check in with your Scoutmaster and see if he agrees that this was enough to pass you the Totin chip. If not, he may require that you demonstrate to him that you are able to do this. Whenever you are using tools, just remember to have adult supervision. Now go out there and chop some wood.